panel tonight is awesome. Justin, we've asked on. Justin works with me at PwC. He's our token American for today, so we're going to ask him lots of American Trumpy type questions. And the SEC is going to come into a little as well for reasons we'll talk about later. Dave Birch seems to get onto most panels whenever he's in the country. No idea why he's here. But, his curmudgeonly, contrarian nature is always good to listen to. He's also the author of an awesome book that's just been released, so I'm sure you'll mention it later. He usually does. Another author who doesn't ever stop talking about his book, Tim Lee, and there's a reason for that, because it's part of the whole marketing hype leading up to a token sale, which he is in the midst of. And Bokky is our token techie on the panel, and therefore the most important person of all. Justin's American, so he doesn't need a microphone.
I don't need a microphone. Yeah, so I think part of the reason I'm here, I've been part of this group for a bit over a year now, I guess. So yeah, I find this mode of investment incredibly interesting, fraught with all kinds of interesting problems. I enjoy disruptive things and thinking about how we can go about taking them mainstream, making them monetizable or useful for our community. So it's an area where I'd like to contribute.
I've been working in electronic money and digital currency and things for a long time, so I'm very curious about any evolutions in the space. I have a book to promote, and
which is really very good.
And I'm lucky to be alive at a time when messing around on Twitter is an actual job, because it won't be for much longer.
And I'm Tim Lee. We're doing a token sale launched on August the 14th, and we're trying to stop film and TV piracy, so a major problem. I too have written a book, but I can't promote it as heavily as Dave, because his is obviously very recent. Mine's called Down the Rabbit Hole, Blockchain in Plain English. Not that I'm promoting it, of course, but yeah, very pleased to be here. When can he get it out? Thanks for asking that question, Chris. I've probably been asleep for a couple of months, Chris. No, it's a secret, but on Amazon. Good.
Hi, I'm into blockchains because previously I was in the financial markets as a quant developer, working out calculations for derivatives and other types of instruments. And someone then presented the trusted platform of the blockchain, and that was beautiful. It was something that I wanted to do. Then Ethereum came out, and you could do things. It's a big toy box, and you can transfer value. And so the crowd sale is just another transfer of value.
Excellent. Have you written a book?
No book yet,
Not
but
yet.
You can check out my GitHub.
Way better. Okay. So what the hell is a token sale? We kind of see it referred to as a bit of the Wild West, I think.
Which one are you, Rob?
Sorry?
Which one are you?
I'm always your Bruno. So this is where we are today, I think a lot of people think. But don't read this stuff. It's consulting crap. But it's because okay. So who of you has actually created a startup and run an ICO? Because we have some in this country. Don't be shy. Any ICOs here?
Not
any. Not yet.
The process.
Yeah. So the ones who are not here are clearly either running away from the Russian mob, looking for an island to buy, or heads down trying to build the ship they told people they're going to build. Okay? It's kind of where you go post that. But it's a popular way to fund these cryptocurrency projects. How many of you have been involved in an ICO? How many of you actually bought tokens on a sale? Okay. How easy was that? Not. Okay. We'll talk. Is it easy okay. How many of you who bought it are not nerds, or geeks, or crypto anarchists, and still found it easy? Fantastic. we'll find out later how easy that is for your customers, because clearly you want people, investors, to come to your token sale that don't have all the barriers. Supporters, no, they cannot be investors, and we'll talk about it.
Very important point.
Mr. Token Sale is with you. So anyway, it's a way of cryptocurrency projects raising money. It circumvents all the traditional venture capital raises, your seed, your Series A, your Series B. Let's do away with all that due diligence. Let's go straight to 100 million raise. Okay. And this is what we're looking at. So courtesy of Autonomous Next, but this came out a couple of weeks ago, I think, and what it shows, and I can read this because I'm a consultant, is that 1.2 billion, where does it say 1.2 billion? It doesn't say on this one. Okay, year by year, 14, 15, 16, we've gone 26 down to 14, there's a reason for that, 222 and 1.26 billion in year to date. That's in US dollars raised through this mechanism. Here are some of the companies, lucky companies, who have raised capital this way. Tezos, 208 million for a white paper. Yeah. How the hell are they going to spend that? How can you find enough Ethereum or blockchain developers to actually deliver that? Crazy. EOS, Bancor, I mean, those of us who went to Consensus this year saw all these people were present there, along with all the Bitcoin super billionaires that are walking around with very, very smug, big grins, just, you know, as the crypto prices were hitting the ceiling. Another graph, this shows 14, 15, 16 again, but broken down. 14, Ethereum. So Ethereum we all consider as being the token sale of all token sales, a thing that launched all of these fantastic things that Bokky creates, and some of you are relying your futures on. Only 18 million. And Tezos goes and raises 200 million. Amazing. So 14, 15, 16, as you can see, more and more coming along, as you would expect. Year to date, ICOs, look at that. Tezos far left, EOS, Bancor, as we saw. But 56 token sales up to, I think, end of June that was. 1.2 billion raised in year, far more than traditional venture capital in this year so far. And a few comments then from the panel, because obviously I like to hear my own voice, but Justin, what do you think about that?
Oh, look, it's an awful lot of money.
What would you do with 1.2 billion?
I'd retire. I don't know. Look, we've talked about this before. That's an awful lot of money spent on projects that have very little information behind them. Founders are scarcely known. The projects aren't vetted, no traditional due diligence behind them. Typically, when you find out any kind of information about them, it's either you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, or it's Slack, or it's GitHub, or it's something where most people don't typically go. And it kind of, kind of joked about this. It's terrifying how much money gets thrown into this space. And for me, I've often wondered, most of these investors or supporters aren't actually known. How many of them are going to come chasing for these individuals and get their money back if things don't go so well? So it's an awful lot of money. It's an awful lot of responsibility for where it's going to go.
Dave, you're a globe-trotting celebrity. What's the word on the street then? Where the places you go? Is this?
Well,
we live in a bit of an echo chamber here. Does that kind of get out of that?
Well, my favourite. I have I flatter myself, a long-running podcast series on iTunes. Been going for 10 years now. And a few years ago, I interviewed one of my favourite people, a guy called Douglas Jackson, who ran a company called eGold. And in the previous generation of this kind of thing, eGold was one of the big, and he has just fantastic. So on the podcast, I ask him, I say something to like, and how did it go? Because you got into this big growth, and he said, it was absolutely fantastic, right up until the moment I got indicted by the federal grand jury. Electronic tag at the time. So. And that's how I feel. The truth is, to call this capital raising, I think, is a very inappropriate and misleading term. This is essentially unlicensed gambling. And when the Hong Kong taxi drivers and Tokyo housewives lose their life savings on these things, which will inevitably happen in not terribly long from now, the backlash will be awful, but creative. So in other words, when the roof falls in on this and we get a proper regulatory infrastructure, what we'll have the other side of that is an entirely new asset class, an entirely new market, which I'm quite excited about. But if you look at that graph, most of those people are going to jail, and the fallout from it is not going to be pretty. It's not capital raising for gambling.
So Tim, your sale isn't. How are you not going to go to jail?
No, I mean, personally, I think as soon as this is regulated, the better. To be absolutely honest, I think. I mean, at the moment, we're sort of wading through this grey mist, trying to find the rails that we need to head on, and it's been a nightmare. We've been doing this solidly for about 6 months. And we're talking. We've been looking at various jurisdictions. We finished up in Singapore, not because we don't want to be in Australia, but Australia hasn't actually housed an token sale. So, from a regulatory risk point of view, if one is the first, it creates a major sort of, you become right on that parapet. And I think, from a regulatory point of view, I'd far rather that it was regulated, so we could say, look, we're doing all the right things that we think are the right things. And the token is intrinsic to the platform and therefore is not a security. That's not what we don't want to sell a speculative investment. We want to solve film piracy. And so if we actually had the rails that we could work on, I would sleep much better at night. So I'm absolutely in agreement that it needs regulation. As to whether it's gambling, I don't necessarily think so. That's quite an extreme view, but we'll have lots of arguments, I'm sure, as time goes on. But certainly for my money, I'd rather see it regulated.
And it's pseudonymous as well, mostly. So on the part of your supporters, not on the part of the founders, who can be hunted down and found at any time.
Well, I mean, we're implementing AML and KYC for transactions over the required limits in Singapore.
Cool. We'll come into that later. Let me just ask Bok, so. Great work, you've got a job for life, haven't you?
Oh, I don't know if the people.
The day rate has gone up the same amounts as the cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, the people I work for don't get sent to jail. But I've invested in a few ICOs myself, and I do actually like the interaction because you can talk directly to the boss of the group and ask them what's happening. This is on the Slacks, the open forums. And I don't get that satisfaction when I invest in BHP or Woolies or anything. You get your reports once a year, twice a year, a few times a year, but you don't know what's behind it. Currently, some of the Slacks I look at, there are people who would track the funds of the group. And if the funds move, they will be asking what happened. And the boss will have to say, oh, we are trying to cash in the field and we can't tell you in advance because that would defeat our position on the market. But they are quite transparent. I like that. But I've seen quite a few dodgy crowd sales. So it's a matter of due diligence. I think people in the crypto industry are expecting to lose their money, and they lose their money so easily. Message comes up and says, my Ether wallet dot something, and click, send, gone. And yeah, the money goes so easily, so quickly. But I do like what's happening. I just hope that the regulators don't shut it down fully. There needs to be some probably group that does more due diligence on behalf of others, because it's hard for individuals to find out what's happening.
Cool. And we'll get on to the regulators later.
Just a quick question. Tim said he invites it to be regulated soon. And I think it's clear what you mean by that. You mean that regulators act. And we see them say, don't do this, you're in trouble, etc. But another way of saying that is, or another interpretation of it, that it is regulated, is that there are regulations that apply to this. And I think that a lot of people differ in opinions about that, and that's a really dangerous cocktail, because you could ask some regulators, say, and they may think this is within our remit and we will act whenever we want because this is a security and people don't have certainty about what will happen because it hasn't happened yet.
Sure.
So I guess I'm interested in that question. Is it under, do current regulations apply to this, or will just dodging terms like ICO keep you clear from that?
But the terms thing doesn't help. I was at a thing in London a couple of weeks ago, and a guy said it was actually with blockchain and gambling, which is actually very interesting meetup. One guy said, well, of course we don't have that problem because for the people that bought our tokens, in their terms and conditions, it says they're making a charitable donation. I said, that's not going to keep you out of jail. You can call it fish sticks if you like. It doesn't matter. To the SEC, it's an unlicensed security. Playing around with the words isn't going to help. What we need is proper regulation. But I do pick up on one point you make, because it isn't a question, I think, of taking current regulation and just applying it. Because lurking behind all of this is a new way of doing business. And what we want to do is find a way to kind of unleash some of the creativity that sits behind that. The idea that you can have something which isn't quite a traditional equity, it isn't quite money, it isn't quite a bond, it is actually something new, and we want to unleash that creativity. But just calling it charity donations, whatever, that's not going to keep you out of jail, is the honest.
You're saying that it's basically going to have to be regulated by the SEC or some sort of securities mechanism, but it doesn't seem like they are an apt group to come into this space. They don't seem to have the technical chops to look at this, and the way that the good actors in this space work.
That's the pot calling the kettle black. In the Prime
well, I'm thinking it's the other way around. The SEC is the
Australian law overrules the laws of mathematics.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that if you're doing Buck was saying that in this environment, having dealt with other fintech environments, the propensity to be a good actor is much greater because you have to work in a transparent mechanism. There are no walls, there's no back alley hedge funds, there's no other extra strings controlling the mechanism. When the SEC comes into those spaces, I don't believe that I've seen them doing their job about taking out the bad actors of in that previous paradigm. Where here,
well, that's. I mean, I agree. That's a slightly different issue, but I agree with you about that. So the fact that, in my opinion, some of the current markets aren't regulated appropriately. I can agree with you about that, but that's not an excuse for not trying to find a better way of constructing the regulation for this market.
They're often kind of apples and oranges,
actually,
right?
By the way, in the previous round of all of this, so I think a lot of you weren't actually born around that time, but sort of, if you go back to the days of DigiCash and there was the same kind of discussion then. Like there's no, but actually the regulators moved reasonably quickly. And in Europe, you had electronic money licensing, payment institution licensing, and now we have payment services directive. So I think actually they can get it together and move these things along.
but even in those cases, I'm older than I look. First of all, in those cases in the past, what we had is that we had situations where moving money still didn't allow us to go across borders. Some of those financial mechanisms were under the guise of corporations sitting within governmental regulations. We're now moving in a space that's almost creating its own economic jurisdiction. We're able to transfer values.
But people used to say that about the internet. Remember John Perry Barlow and the EFF and the
But there was no trust mechanism.
You can say that, but you'll still get arrested at JFK and put in jail. You can say, well, I'm a citizen of the internet. I'm not.
No. I'm not talking about citizen. But I'm not. I don't want to. I don't want there to be confluence between an individual identity. I'm not talking about Tim getting arrested or not. What I'm saying is that the mechanism. What I'm saying is does the mechanism have validity outside of government?
Book publishing for your book.
I agree. I mean, it clearly doesn't matter if Tim gets arrested, but well, I just want to take exception exception to what you're saying there, which I'm very sympathetic to the idea that the SEC doesn't have the technical chops, but I don't think that's relevant to the question of whether they believe, or whoever else decides the law and has the guns, that it is within their jurisdiction. And
Oh, I agree
in
that
the
they
past.
feel that it is. I agree that they feel that it is, but we're talking about things.
So sorry, let me stop that a little bit there, because we'll come back to regulations, and we'll have a look at what the SEC announced today and what the implications of that. There's a more fundamental question, I think, here. The token that is being sold, what is it for? You know, token is an overarching name, like blockchain, I guess. But is there functional value? Is there speculative value associated with it? Is it a combination of the two? Does it look and smell and quack like a duck, and therefore it is a duck token, duck coin? Or is it something entirely else? Is it a pay to play? Is it an access token into data or analytics or service which hasn't yet been delivered? So, just in terms of what a token is, are we confused about it because we use one term, or a confusion of terms, and we don't really know what we're talking about yet because it's too early?
I think we land on a term like token because we want a nebulous term that we can plug anything into that we want, right? Yeah, I mean, and so what it actually means is whatever you say that it means whenever you're going to use it, and so which is why, you know, looking forward, thinking of things like the SEC and this ruling comes out, they're perfectly happy to use terms like ICO. Bottom line is, it just, from their point of view, it doesn't matter what you call it, it matters how it's being used, right? And so that's basically my take. How you're defining it technologically may differ from how exactly you're describing it, may differ from how actually people in the market are actually using it, and all of those points are actually relevant.
So what is this Howey test that people refer to?
Howey test is a test that was derived from a lawsuit between the SEC and Howey in the 40s, right? Yeah. That eventuated in a 4-part test, which parts I can't remember off the top of my head, for what a security is defined at, and that sort of became the bedrock, I think, internationally for how one could go about defining a security. So everybody tends to pick it up.
And it applies today.
People use it today. Use a lot more. I mean, you'll note, like even in this latest ruling, I think they mentioned it once or twice, but it's not the most important thing that actually comes up.
Dave?
Well,
for you, what's the difference? What is a token?
I think, because I think of it in a fairly narrow way, because I think of it as a claim on some future product or service. So, I don't know, do you remember Edward de Bono, the lateral thinking guys? You have to be old enough to. If any of you ever worked for a management consultant, you used to get sent on these stupid courses where you read the different hats. He wrote a thing called the IBM dollar, and he said, quite presently, I think, he said, you know, in the future, because of advances in technology and computing and stuff, he said in the future, when you set up a company, instead of you know, raising equity and putting out shares, why don't you just put out a claim on whatever it is you're going to produce? Remember, he was writing this, you know, coming up 30 years ago. And he said, for various technical reasons, those markets will trade more efficiently and more liquidly than equity markets, so they're more akin to foreign exchange markets. So I create a new company, and I'm going to do so-and-so, and I give you the token, which allows you to claim on that in the future. And initially, that will trade at a very heavy discount. But as my company becomes successful and more people want these tokens to do whatever it is my company does, then the price will go up and so on. And I think that's, say he wrote that a long time ago, but I think in the framework, the way he thinks about that, makes a lot of sense to me. But that's why I call it, it isn't quite money, it's not quite a bond, it is genuinely something new that we're looking for.
And Tim, for Veredictum, Ventana is your token. What does a Ventana give me?
If you're a film and TV producer, I mean, we're basically looking towards searching for pirated content, for stolen content. So if people have downloaded a video from YouTube, put it up on Facebook, or put it on a website, that sort of thing, that's the modus operandi of what we're trying to do. And the idea is that you know, we've got various services that we're actually offering, and we will actually be taking Ventana for those actual services. But the actual platform itself is trying to bring together the whole creative community together to solve the problem the creative community has. And so it's an incentivization structure for those players to be part of the ecosystem, to actually help us. For example, how many of you have heard of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence? Yeah, I'm surrounded by geeks. Of course there's going to be lots of hands going on. But it's the, where, just for those that don't know, it's where signals are being down into space, the information comes back, and then it's filtered out to about 3 million people worldwide. We're doing the SETI for pirated content as one aspect of what we're doing. So it's very much a distributed search and detect structure. So they will actually pay for that service to be on the platform. So it's essential that structure is that we detail that, because it wants to establish the form itself.
And there's no way that...
Let's just explain to me that this is why we fell out, because I'm militantly against this sort of nonsense about stolen and pirated and whatever. I'll work on nuclear weapons, I'll work on tobacco, I will not work on DRM of any form.
But what we're trying to do is trying to...
Until they reset copyright to the welfare maximising level of 14 years, I will do everything in my power to subvert these despicable industries.
So when your book is pirated, you won't complain?
Yeah, good. I don't make any money out of the book. I make money from getting invited to speak and being hired by companies. It's a different business model.
I'm not sure how else I'd watch Game of Thrones, but...
We've interviewed a couple of independent film directors. There's one down in Melbourne called Matthew Holmes, who directed a thing called Legend of Ben Hall, which has got US distribution. Great independent movie, and 50% of all his downloads have been pirated. And he's now in the situation where if his movie does not make money, he will not be able to make another movie. And we interviewed somebody in Hong Kong 2 weeks ago when we were at Rise launching our white paper. There's a Filipino director, exactly the same issues. If we don't do something about it, and I take on board your gripe with the Copyright Act, and that's a much wider issue. But if we don't stop this, we're going to have a cultural narrative where the independent voices, those controversial voices, those cultural voices, are going to disappear because they can't financially make another bit of content. And if that happens, we're just going to get mass-produced crap. And honestly, that's not what I want.
It's not about copyright stuff. However, if I was, say, a potential customer who wanted to buy that or any other product from you, would you accept Australian dollars, or would you only accept your token as payment?
We will accept other fiat currencies, but we'll convert it spot into Ventana to spread them up to 70% will go to the network and supporting us.
Okay, I think
you need to read the white paper.
There's a subtext there. I think maybe to make it explicit, I would suggest then that you may not like this comment, maybe you'd like to reply, but then the token isn't very much inherent to the platform because you're perfectly willing to accept Australian dollars in its place.
No, because fundamentally, if you've got a bucket load of people, if somebody's providing you with 5 cents worth of bandwidth, you try and put that on a credit card.
I didn't talk about credit cards.
No, that's the intrinsic benefit of the digital currencies, the cryptocurrencies. You can divide a cryptocurrency, as you know, the Bitcoin to 100 millionth.
All right, well then will you accept Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, ultimately, yes. Yeah, but in order to actually make sure we distribute it fairly, the 70% model to all the nodes that are actually helping us, that's going to be in the cryptocurrency.
All right, here's my question. Why not just use Bitcoin?
Because we've got a whole ecosystem that we're actually trying to control. We're trying to develop an entire ecosystem that we want to actually control. We can't control the price of Bitcoin. We can't. I mean, there's just no. Well, no, hang on, no. Just bear with me a second. I don't mean that. No, but I mean in terms of Bitcoin is just going all over the place. We've got to try and maintain some stability where we can.
How would you maintain the price of your token?
Well, I mean, it's going to be. It's obviously going to be. It's going to be available. It's going to be in the markets, obviously. But
so
I mean,
you won't maintain the price of your token.
Well, if there are, I mean, well, no, I mean, if there are major problems, and we've got reserves like a lot of other people have, I'm not saying we're not in the least bit trying to manipulate the currency at all. We just want to make sure there's no volatility. We're going on to the smaller exchanges so we don't get those high volatility.
I just want to make sure I'm not suggesting that you're doing anything wrong,
No,
but
sure.
I'm asking my question as a sort of to explode the argument, or to explore the argument that the token is not like an existing value transaction system and is necessary to be created and distributed and is inherent to the value of the system, you know, in a way that perhaps translating it into dollars or Bitcoin suggests that it might not be.
Well, no, I mean, we're looking at the idea that there will be nodes geographically right around the world. The electricity prices are completely different, right? And it's there's about optimization of searching and that type of thing. If we need to incentivize various other quarters to actually enable more optimized search, then we've got deliberately set up an incentivization token structure that's linked into what we're actually doing. So there's lots of things. I mean, we're getting into the granularity of things, but there's lots of things that we're doing that are intrinsic to what the ecosystem and the economy that we're actually creating.
So I guess the question, Chris, is how intrinsic to the ecosystem, to the platform, does that cryptocurrency, that token, have to be a token, a legitimate token for that platform? Is that what you're saying? Is there a kind of assessment where that one has to make to identify the legitimacy of that token?
I put it this way: what problem does creating that token solve?
Yeah. But if it's not about the token, it's about the business problem that the platform itself is trying to. Absolutely. That's a different problem, isn't it?
It's the incentivization to solve the problem of film piracy.
But these, I mean, I think you're absolutely right about so if it turns out, so if it turns out that using tokens in that kind of de bono sense means more efficient and more liquid markets, and it's easier to raise things, that's a good thing, like having this new way of doing it. I mean, we have other tradable instruments right now. We have stocks and bonds, and they do different things and fulfill different economic functions. You know, this is not a copy of one of those. This is something very new, and I think it is at least a minimum a plausible hypothesis that it will lead to more efficient markets in more efficient capital allocation in some ways. I think one of the reasons why you want tokens, you want the people who put these things in the marketplace to have every incentive to get the value of the tokens up, because apart from anything else, they have some of them, you know, and so that I should be out there competing to get the value of my tokens up by making my product and service useful, not by market manipulation, speculation, asymmetric information, being in bed with Goldman Sachs and whatever, is broadly a good thing, you know. So I mean, I'm absolutely right with you on the spirit of the whole thing. Sorry, you have a question about that?
Well, maybe it's a comment as well too, but following on from David's point, and what you're talking about, Tim, is the token therefore trading on novelty rather than value?
Is that a question for Bok or for...
No, it wasn't in relation to Tim, but also David.
Bok, I'll come to you in a sec. Can we come back to that?
Sure.
Tom? Bok,
Yep.
This is all craziness, isn't it? From
Yeah,
a techie
so
perspective, this is just ones and zeros. We've got the most democratic global system possible. ERC20 is going to just change the world so we can standardize tokens and issue whatever we like.
Yep, I've got to come back first. YouTube was mainly stolen content a long time ago, and probably a lot of it now. So you are going to chase after the copyright people who take YouTube videos. That's funny. But yeah, tokens. I like a few projects on the Ethereum blockchain. One of them is Golem, Singular DTV, Status. There's a few others around, and some of the projects I'm working with. And I've been auditing people's source code, and I come across these things where the owner, which is the company that's fundraising, can burn people's tokens, can generate tokens on the fly. They have full control over the token contract, and I don't like that. So I'll tell them, and they will make the decision whether they keep it in or not. But I have it in my audit report, so potential investors can see what they're up for. But some of the nice projects, they aim to build open source software so that even if the whole company went down, the tokens will live forever. The open source software will live forever. If someone else comes and takes the open source software and builds something better out of it, the project lives on. So it's one of my goals. I'm working with another company currently, and we aim to build an ecosystem where the token will live by itself, and we will build the tools and things which will eventually support that. And if the company goes bust, doesn't matter.
So, from your perspective, when you've taken the right colour pill, I can't remember whether it's red or blue, but when you can see the Ethereum blockchain like the Matrix,
Yep.
and you know, all of this kind of business stupidity is kind of put to one side, what does it look like? Is it a smart contract is the same as a token, and it's there and it's doing stuff for you in ones and zeros and structured programming languages?
It's a very beautiful giant box of Lego Mindstorm for me, where you can make it do things and it will stay there. And there's a whole permission thing, where if you want to transfer from one account to another, you need the right permission to do it, and that's your permission. You don't want someone else's permission. I like that.
It's a very simple and elegant thing.
It's very elegant.
Yeah.
So the security model of the blockchain is beautiful. So if you applied it on a lot of, your SQL server and everything, this is where you sign the transaction that you are issuing. And if that signature matches to what the platform believes should be the right signature, it allows it through. So the security of our current financial system, you got all these companies that are holding onto their databases, and they've got to protect everything with firewalls and firewalls. The blockchain solves so much of it. You have one public blockchain, and it's being attacked every day, and it has stood the test of time. All these people creating their private blockchains won't stand that test, and it also doesn't have the utility of being available to everyone. So I'm not for private blockchains.
I think that's a whole other day of debate, private versus public. So, who of you have been through an ICO again? Just hands up, tell me. Who think they know what they would do if they had to go through an ICO and wanted to? Okay, so it's enough. So in a very simplistic way, we have URI, semi-trusted, because our bank trusts us, but the network itself doesn't trust us. Paying money, and we've got to get into the system, so we have to get crypto, we have to get Bitcoin or Ether to actually to play in this grand gamble that is a token sale. That crypto exchange tends to have a wallet for you. So you've kind of lost your fiat at this point. They've taken your fiat and they've given you something which could potentially get hacked and get lost. So read Mt. Gox. You can transfer it to a private wallet, as everyone who's holding Bitcoin, by the way, at the moment and hasn't transferred it into their own private wallet should do before the end of the month. If you want to know why, ask Jason at the back. But it's imperative. You move it to a multi-sig wallet that's is SegWit. We have a company, Startup XYZ, and we want to create XXX tokens, because I think Vitalik came out and said there are quite a few three-letter acronyms that could be used still. So XXX, I'm sure, is taken. The startup issues a white paper, or white papers. This is your entry point. This is in lieu of that proper investor memorandum and business plan and the torture that venture capitalists push you through if you want to raise tuppence halfpenny. You can get 100 million with that. Excellent. You put it on your website, which is very well professionally created, and that's what's attracted me amongst the swarm of other token sales that are going on right now. Excellent. I've seen the white paper. I've put my my crypto into a place where I can buy it, and the startup usually pre-mines a shed load of this token. And sometimes it's tell me if I'm wrong here. I might be talking smoking crack, but I'm okay so far, right? Okay. They can pre-mine based on the crypto economics of their particular business plan. Okay, So they may say, let's mint, or mine rather, coin on a particular algorithm that will top out at 20 million after 40 years or something like Bitcoin. Or we may pre-mine them all right now, and we're going to issue 10% of them, hold them back, all the rest back for the founders. Ripple. And or something in between. You know, there are a variety of crypto economics that apply here. And of course, this is all new. It's really new, so we don't really know how much of this is going to play out. But anyway, we've chosen our crypto economics. We've decided, and we've published it in the white papers, we're going to tell everybody how many, XXX coins are going to be awarded to the founders, how many are being held back, how many are being made for public sale, how many are going to be made available to the whales as part of a pre-sale, which is heavily discounted usually. But it's all going to be part of this this process, which may or may not be, Tim, transparent. I don't know. You tell me. Ethereum is usually used, or has been used, but it doesn't have to be. We can have private blockchains, we can have alternate blockchains like Tezos and Co are proposing. Once they get to an exchange, a crypto exchange, like Poloniex or others, that are willing to list those tokens, you get this kind of secondary market effect, and you get the ability to trade under the conditions that are set out by the startup. But at this point, once the sale has happened, the founders, happy days. I've got 200 million, I'm going to buy my Caribbean island, I'm going to hire 10 million blockchain developers because I can afford them now. And I'm going to build this platform that everyone really, really wants, that's going to cure world hunger and everything. And then we can buy and sell via our personal wallet. So in a very simple way, that's the process of going through an ICO, token sale. And, but that's a technical thing. I mean, that's a lot of wallets. At this point, it becomes very anonymous, which means that this is the point at which the Russian mafia and ISIS start buying in. And you, as the startup founder whose name is everywhere, don't know who's supporting or investing or whatever your token looks like is going to be. So this is a pretty risky setup, isn't it? How are you protecting yourself, Tim?
I mean, how are we protecting ourselves, or how are we protecting the supporters? Or are you saying in general? I mean, certainly AML and KYC under Singaporean jurisdiction, we're implementing.
But you said you're doing KYC, so presumably this anonymous. This doesn't happen in your process.
Absolutely, that's certainly the aim.
All your supporters are identified.
Well, anything over a certain value is actually formally identified according to Singaporean jurisdiction.
But once people buy your tokens, is it then KYC AML free?
No, it's the idea that we're sort of pre-selling the idea that you can't actually buy anything over a certain quantum, unless you've actually been KYC.
But then once it goes on the market.
But once it's on the market, obviously we can't do anything. I mean, that we can't legislate.
You're not liable. And you're also not liable.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, we've done the right thing, we believe, under the jurisdiction that we're working with.
You've had all your Bitcoin and you cashed out, and the market's crashed because you flooded the market all at once.
Well, certainly. I mean, we've seen that with Ethereum coming down very recently. Or the belief is that a lot of that fall in the price was a lot of tokens being sold. I mean, most professional teams do it via an OTC, over-the-counter structure, so it doesn't interfere with the actual market itself, so that the price of Ethereum or the price of Bitcoin doesn't crash. I think the biggest concern that I have personally is with how many have heard of the parity wallets that got hacked this week and last week?
That's great.
Yeah. And please don't take this wrong, Bokky, but I mean, smart contracts aren't necessarily always smart, and the problem is if code is law, the problem is if the code has got a bug, then everybody's screwed. And it's a real problem that we're sort of facing. How do we make sure we've got absolute security as far as we can, best in class? And that's a real challenge, in terms of protecting everybody's interests as well as our own.
So for those who don't know what the parity hack was...
So the parity hack, Parity is one of the companies that build part of the Ethereum software, the node client that communicates with the Ethereum network. and they built some smart contracts, and it's a multi-sig, meaning that if you want to send a transaction, you might need 3 people out of 5 people to say, yes, the transaction is valid, go off. And a hacker found a bug in it, a bug that allowed anyone to become the owners. Bad. So the wallets for 3 projects were hacked. About 30 million was stolen. White hat hackers then went in and stole 200 million. And they are currently in the process of returning to the original owners, and they are going through a very nice process of making sure it's all correct and giving people the right wallet that is not hacked, and going through audits, and I'm doing the reconciliation to make sure that they are being honest, but they are pretty good.
Could you just explain white hat?
White hat?
So, even though you're wearing a black hat, you kind of...
yeah, that's right. I have different color hats, depending whether I'm visible or not. Yeah, so it was. There are groups that are concerned about the safety that's happening on the internet, on the blockchain system. I haven't seen that much on Bitcoin.
If I was going to steal money, that's how I would do it. It'd be the perfect cover.
Yeah.
So you go in and steal 7 million, then you turn up as the white hat hacker.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. So you don't know who any of these people are. So what I would say is, I think, because we are like in a law firm, and I'm not sure how these things like the etiquette in Australia, but I really think you should stop calling them contracts while we're inside a law firm.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But then the law firms and the financial institutions, they squeeze so much money out of each of us. And yes.
But it's misleading to the audience. So if you just call them smart applications, well, actually you told them that they weren't smart, and I agree with you. So let's just call them applications for the moment. And I think that will help people locate them properly in the spectrum.
Yeah.
So there are these applications that have bugs in. That's the summary of
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. But it's not systemic, like the $2,000 per person in Australia profits that the financial companies gain, and it's just a big fall.
And they're not behind any black doors. There's no, everything, you're seeing the code. The reason we knew what that was, the reason you white hackers and the white hats were able to go in, is because that indelible blockchain is not like an application. An application is behind somebody else's firewall.
No, that's a good point.
Providing a service that we don't know how much they're skimming off.
It's indelible and it's transparent, so everyone knows. So where's all the Mt. Gox money gone?
That's not an indelible. That's completely.
That wasn't an indelible blockchain. That was.
That went into an exchange.
Nothing to do with the indelible blockchain.
It went into an exchange, and in the exchange, black box.
Those were black hat applications written to be black hat applications.
Right. Okay. So it's transparent and
it's not transparent.
You can still hide.
Oh, come on. This is very basic. If gold is stolen from a vault, if gold is stolen from a vault, does that mean gold has no value? Of course not. You can steal anything from a vault. It says nothing about the inherent value of gold. It says a lot about the vault. So if you take something that's on a blockchain and take it off the blockchain and put it into a vault.
That wasn't the thrust of my point. Is
the analogy is correct.
The advertised capabilities.
People need to understand
which are
this.
that we have transparency and blah blah blah.
The exception I take is that you weren't helping them. Well, you could have helped people understand that by making a clearer. Okay, so if that was your intention, I'm with you.
my only real concern as
they're not smart, they're not contracts. It's not indelible. It's not transparent.
Wait, hey.
No, they are indelible and they are transparent.
Are you talking about blockchains or private businesses holding your money? Because there's a very big difference, and that's the distinction that blockchains.
My real concern.
Yeah, public blockchain.
Public blockchain.
Okay, my real concern is this time last year there was $53 million that was attacked via the DAO, right? Now, luckily that money was in the main, got back, right? And there was a lot of press, a lot of mainstream press that happened that time. $31 million goes missing, and there's hardly a blip in the mainstream press anymore. And for me, don't get me wrong, I appreciate that code goes wrong and all that sort of stuff. But if it goes wrong on our watch, that's a major responsibility. And I am seriously questioning whether we actually rely on the code alone. Whether we have to have some backup and some, looking at even sort of direct escrow facilities, which will cost more, but at least if we've got far stronger security in place. I mean, I find it ridiculous that $31 million, talking to, I won't name the particular parties, it was a blasé view. Yeah, it's $31 million, it's a bug in the code, get over it. No, don't get over it. That's serious money.
Yeah, I just think we do need to make a distinction between blockchains and non-blockchains, and code and not code, and these are very relevant. But it's like, but saying, just stopping at code and saying, well, what should we do if it's code, is like saying, do you trust machinery? It's a vast space. It's only very vaguely classifies this piece of engineering, and it does say nothing about the quality or the integrity of the people who made it, the quality of the system itself. I mean, there's been plenty of failures of modern engineering in over hundreds of years, and that doesn't mean that the entire effort to use this category of technology is worthless. So everyone's got to level up here. They've got to actually take responsibility to understand a little bit deeper about this thing they're investing in.
That's all well and good. Heidelberg Machine's been around for 150 years. Absolutely, I trust it. Code that's been around for 2 years?
Code's been around for 250 years.
No, okay, well the code relating to parity and relating to Ethereum and those kind of areas, don't get me wrong, I think the potential is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I am not decrying that. I'm involved in this overall ecosystem. Am I going to put other people's support in instances where the code has been having problems? I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Can I suggest, I've just this afternoon decided to audit the consensus multi-sig wallet, because it's one of the main points where people store their money. And I've got a donation address there, so make sure it's a big fat donation, and I will audit it even better.
We have a question about.
So, I mean, talking about the security, so I used to work for CBA up until recently. They've got the largest cybersecurity team in the country. Some absolutely amazing people, and holy shit, the size of the holes in the code, the number of places that you can hack the thing, it's ridiculous. Even on the new code, even on the new stuff. So when you turn around and say, we're going to follow best standards. Well, CBA is better than best standards. We're going to have the best people. Well, CBA's got the best people and more of them than anybody else. When you're building this kind of an ecosystem, it's got to go and be above and beyond that kind of a mechanism. So how do you turn around and switch the incentives for, like, if I'm talking about an application on the web, I can use bug bounties to try and turn the incentivization for white hat hackers and get more of those guys coming at me than black hat hackers. How do you do that on a blockchain or a DAO, ICO, before, like, at a white paper level, before we get out there? How do you get in, like, really deep on that security? Make sure.
I don't see why we're not talking about architecture. I mean, it's got to be code, engineering, architecture, testing, quality. Just like we have it when we're talking about nuts and bolts. We can't condemn nuts and bolts, but we do have ANSI standards. We have mil-spec standards in the US. We've got ISO 9000 standards.
But also, you have recourse and you have expectation of you have recourse and you have expectation of redress. I don't care how bad CBA's code is, right? Yeah. If the money gets stolen from CBA, it's not my problem.
Exactly. And it's insured.
CBA is a regulated financial institution. Yeah. My money is safe.
I can't sue Tim if someone.
I don't care how bad their code is.
Yeah, but in most cases, like we're talking about the DAO hack, every penny was recovered. Every penny.
Everyone got 105%.
100 or more if you had loans out at the time. Yeah. So we got hacked and we won and the hacker lost. Come to our environment, don't live in those environments.
Yeah, but the point is that the people in that, I mean, I'm not saying I support one side or the other, but I do understand the argument which says, well, hold on a second. Nobody did anything wrong. The guy played by the rules. The
we decided that he did something wrong. We hard-forked him out of this
trustless environment.
You can't do that all the time.
It's not a trustless environment. Somebody can just arbitrarily decide, oh, you know what, we changed our mind. Actually, those transactions didn't go through. We're just going to roll it back and start again. Yeah, that's completely unacceptable.
It was not rolled back.
It was not rolled back. It was never.
Guys, Can I just move the debate on? We'll have time for Q&A afterwards.
I'll give you the technical details. The blockchain was not rolled back.
Yes.
The software was modified, and it was clearly stated to the community, the miners, the users, that accounts were going to be moved by the source code into another account, the curator's multi-sig. And if the community didn't agree with it, they don't have to run the source code. They just use the old version, or they create another version. So it was by consensus of the whole community, or 90% of the community, that we're going to take this blockchain forward and we're going to take back the funds. So it is better than just one institution holding on and deciding what happens, or one government holding on and deciding what's happening. Because this is the whole community of users that's deciding.
But it still created a fork, it created an additional token.
Users and miners.
Yeah, but look at the value on that token.
Yeah, these are things which are part of the hardening of a new ecosystem that we don't understand.
I don't think it's an example of what you just said. I think that what it's an example of is that people can completely choose what chain they are on. And 10% of the people chose the original chain and they had their reasons and they didn't need to explain their actions to anyone. 90% of the people didn't like that, they chose the other path. And this is something that anybody can do anytime with a public blockchain. Every single block could be a forking opportunity. If you want to take it a different direction and there are people with you, or you can go your own way if you really want, but obviously you're incentivized by the actions.
I don't accept the tyranny of the majority as a regulatory structure. It's
I'm not saying it's a regulatory.
It's not a regulatory structure. If you just let everybody vote, then you end up with Donald Trump. I mean, I'm not sure that's not quite where we want to go.
I just want to ask one very quick technical question from you, Bob, because I think you'll probably have a better understanding than probably most of us here, with the greatest respect to everybody else. The attack with the DAO, $53 million lost. The software was changed, let's call it, or rather than rollback.
Yeah.
Given that the ETC tokens were released, did the hacker actually get 10% of that $53 million?
So what happened with the main chain, the Ethereum chain, was the money was moved into the curator's multi-sig, and then it was then given back to the community through a withdrawal contracts. On the ETC chain, which is the Ethereum Classic chain, the white hats tried to hack back the remaining funds, and they managed to get 70% of the funds back. So the hacker currently has about $90 million in Ether Classic on the Ethereum chain. He has moved this was back several months back, about a few $100,000 worth. I tried to contact the exchanges to say, hey, the funds are going through, stop it. The Bitcoin blockchain was going through a big surge in transaction, then there was a 24-hour delay. So the exchange could go and cancel the transactions by sending a higher value transaction, higher fee transaction to clear out the account. By the time they got to it, it was gone, 24 hours. But your original question was what's happened to the Ether Classic. The hacker still has about $90 million there, and will be slowly moving it.
So ultimately the hacker did get money, ultimately.
Yes.
So what could possibly go wrong? We're just talking about hacking. Type professors. Hacking is only one. We've kind of done the hacking thing to death, let's say. What about fraud? Dave, you've got quite a few favourite frauds. What are your favourite frauds on token sets?
Yeah. Well, actually, I meant.
Sorry, Justin, you've been very quiet.
I'd make a more generic point about what constitutes fraud. So if you look at the reason why we have the security laws that we have now is because of fraud. It isn't because of technical failures or security or whatever. And so things that people did. I'll give you a very good example, which is one of my favourite examples, by the way. So you know the World Series in baseball. You must have heard of this. Very popular in America. But you know why it's called the World Series, right? It has nothing to do with the world. It's only played by America and the Toronto Blue Jays. It's called the World Series because it was run by the New York World, the newspaper. And the New York World newspaper was bought by J. Poulter, one of the robber barons in the early 20th century. And he bought the newspaper for the explicit purpose of printing fake news in order to manipulate stock prices. Like, the reason we have these security laws is because people did this sort of thing. If you look at whatever technical analysis you're doing, you have absolutely no idea what's going on in the. You know, for all I know, all of the Bitcoin could belong to Goldman Sachs. I'd have no way of knowing it. You know, all the trading that's going on, it could be, absolutely honest, it could be naked market manipulation. And given that an awful lot of the people that are in that space are in it, they're not dedicated like Bok or interested in the future potential of it like I am, or interested in it for doing something that's good. Like it's just naked market manipulation and stuff. And so we have these security laws for a reason. So these kind of frauds, those founder frauds and investor frauds, are the same old frauds that we always had before. There's nothing special about them because it's it's the same old frauds over and over again, and we're going to need the same laws to deal with it. I mean, I go back to the point that was made at the beginning, which is we don't want to crush the potential of the new space. But there's going to be a lot of this. Now, historically, that's not been a bad thing. I mean, it's been a bad thing for the people involved, but in the long run, it's not been a bad thing. The tulip bulb crash that everybody always talks about with respect to Bitcoin, well, the outcome of that was we had futures and options markets, and Amsterdam became one of the richest places on the planet because they had markets and other people.
Yeah, so other people can manipulate the market.
That's right. It's all
these are non-transparent examples.
Those were regulated markets. You take a step forward each time. We had, the famous English example, which is absolutely analogous to this, is the railway crash of the 1840s, when everybody went mad, raising money to build railways, which they never built. The sky fell in. The railway companies went to the Prime Minister for a bailout, like they got from Clinton and Blair, and Benjamin Disraeli told them to get stuffed. There's no reason why the government should bail out bankrupt companies. In fact, the courts actually were quite. There's a very famous court case where the investors, because it's widows and orphans that lose all the money, and they took one of the railway companies to court, and the judge ruled that the people that ran it weren't crooks; they were just idiots. And so, if they're idiots, you can't have your money back, whereas if they're crooks, you can. What came out of that? Accounting standards. And so all of a sudden, because you had accounting standards, now you can invest in companies all over the world that you've never seen. You look at this boom in late Victorian capitalism. So I say it in a very positive way. The roof's going to fall in on this, but the historical record says what comes out of it is we want regulation in this space, and it will make things better for us.
I have to respond.
So who here heard about the BBSW scandal? Yeah? And what happened to it? Anyone heard? It all went quiet. So what happened was that a few of the majors were manipulating the BBSW rate and then making money off the derivatives and other instruments that are priced off the rate.
One guy in jail?
No, not that I know of. But what happened was the proceedings started against the major banks, and they contributed some funds to the regulator to create a watchdog, and the regulators went quiet. Big fund.
Can I respond to that?
That's not what I argue. You can't say, okay, well, it doesn't matter that Volkswagen were fiddling their diesel engines because everyone else is fiddling. I mean, that's not the right argument.
No.
What happened? The point is, you're saying people did something. They haven't in the UK, fixing the LIBOR rate in the UK. People did fix the LIBOR rate. You know what? It's illegal, and they're in court, and the companies are being fined billions of dollars. That's what should happen
in Australia.
That's what should
the
happen.
Regulators got paid to keep quiet.
SEC, what's happened to them?
Yeah, I guess. I think a lot of misinformation about what exactly the implications of that thing were. Some people have interpreted it to mean an awful lot of stuff about ICOs in general. For me, I thought the interesting pieces were the following. Just one that I thought the ruling was actually pretty measured. I mean the point was that look at what the DAO actually was, what the tokens were. They were an investment in capital with the expectation of return and the opportunity to vote with capital actually being managed by third parties. What you've got right there is an investment fund, and you have a stake in an investment fund. So there's, to anybody who's paying any attention to this, it was obviously a security of some kind. Now, what the SEC then did, though, was made pretty damn clear that that ruling, or that decision about the DAO, which happened a long time ago, which actually, thinking about where regulators are at in this, you can make the point that maybe they're not technically competent to understand an awful lot of this stuff, but at least in my own experience dealing with regulators, they try awfully hard to understand as much as they can. They tend to be very slow. They try to, and if you read the ruling, they tend to be measured there. The same thing with the Bitcoin ETF. A lot of us, myself included, think that was a very good decision that they came down on. And really what the regulators are trying to do is try to make sure that they understand, hey, what exactly is this technology doing? Does it already exist within our existing frameworks? And if so, we're not going to touch it. All we're going to do is provide some guidelines to try to instruct these companies or their investors to stay within certain lanes. They don't want to change that much. So to your point earlier, I don't think most of the regulators, at least that I've interacted with, are interested in changing much laws. As a matter of fact, like in the States, depending on how you're actually using the ICO, it either falls as security or could fall as a commodity or something like a currency. And they just want their own regulatory bodies to sort of make the decisions on their own, and they don't want to change that much. And I spent half a day yesterday talking with AFP about this crap. And they're kind of the same mind. They're just like, well, you know, I was talking with half of them in a room that are all interested in buying tokens ICOs right now. And their attitude was like, legal now? Fuck, you buy it now? And I'm really not joking. So all that to say is, like, it's actually a lot more positive than I think you might appreciate, and they try really hard. Last thing I mentioned probably with the SEC is that there's a second document that was released that I think is missed in the conversation, and that's where it provides guidance to both companies and investors or stakeholders or whatever the hell you want to call them. And that's where they basically say, like, listen, we don't have a problem with anybody actually buying this stuff, but understand that if what you're investing in, well, A, read your shit, know the company that you're into, and make sure you're actually responsible with the funds you're donating. But if it's not a security, it's outside our jurisdiction, and you're on your own. So if you spend your money on this thing and it gets lost, that's your problem. And they're very explicit about this. And I think, you know, from my point of view, what are they doing? They're saying, we don't want to play nanny state in this. What we want to do is allow you to be responsible for your money, but you're really going to have to act independently there. So anyway, from my point of view, it's fairly measured. I don't know that they could have done much more. The one thing that I thought was really strange, Rob, you and I were talking about this earlier, in the ruling there's no discussion of the Bank Secrecy Act or KYC or AML. So for me that was kind of a holy shit moment. Like, so of all the things you want to focus on, it's whether this stuff counts as security or not. You don't want to talk about who's actually involved. And so if I were...
that will open up a whole other can of worms for them. You know?
Not really. I mean, all they would have...
If they set that precedent?
Well, it's no. Well, I think it's already implicitly there.
Yeah, but
so
they're talking about the DAO in the past. Why don't we go back to 2008?
No. Well, if they want to provide... Well, the purpose of that, right, is not...
Is KYC under the SEC's remit?
For purchasing securities, you have to be able to perform KYC and AML.
Yeah.
The broker does.
Yeah. But also, if you're doing a DPO, you're in a similar circumstance. Direct public offering, so which is effectively what these ICOs kind of are, right? So you have to, right? It's not a new can of worms if you're going to do this anyway.
No, I mean, it's not a new can of worms for us. If they set the precedent that they can go back and set a designation around the DAO as having these particular markers, they're not going to put the ones that would also be able to be used to look at what happened in 2008 in the American stock crashes, because then that would be able to allow law firms that are still holding cases open to go after those banks a foothold in a door they don't want to open.
They're already, banks are already responsible to know your customer loss and stuff like that. So they already know. So that's not a new issue. It's more that this is an obvious extension of existing law that one would expect. And I'm pretty sure that anybody who ran afoul, if the DAO were to exist today and be run in the States and they didn't perform KYC and suddenly the SEC started looking at it, I'm pretty sure they'd be pretty pissed. Yeah. So that's kind of all I'm getting at. So if I were to advise anybody to go off and try to do an ICO of anything that smelled like a security or not, I would say you're better off doing this. Otherwise, don't sell to American customers. You can just...
One of the scammiest scams was from a group in Australia. And they just appeared on the internet one day. and said we're doing a crowdfund for this thing.
Tell us what it is.
Is it Monaco?
Contingency. And so someone on, sorry? It's right there in the name, yeah. So some of the watchdogs in the Ethereum ecosystem said, you're in Australia, talk to Bokky. And so they did not contact me, so I tried to contact them, and they didn't say anything. I offered, yeah, I'll come and talk with you to check you out, and then work out what's happening. And there's no reply, and they ran away with a few $100,000. It's probably worth about $1 million now, or $2 million, but Australia.
Thank you. Guys on the panel, final words. Keep it to 30 seconds, and then we'll go to final Q&A. Tim, you've been quiet, unusually quiet for a while.
I welcome regulation. I think it definitely needs the rails to be in place, and I take on board some observations. But I think for anybody to actually do a token sale, it's much easier if you know where the boundaries actually lie.
Are you aiming off for your sale? Are you aiming off for a regulatory framework which you believe should exist?
Yeah, we've looked at the industry best practices overall, and there's a really good paper, somebody might be able to reference it better than I can, that Consensus did with a law firm, stateside law firm, came out at the beginning of January.
They want to be the next one.
Right, but it was actually a really good paper that looks at what is when a token sale is more a token sale rather than a security. Anybody reference that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Coin Center, it was Coin Center. Coin Center. Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. It's quite a long document, but there's also a spreadsheet in there that defines whether you're a token sale or not.
And you're relying on that to keep you out of jail?
Essentially, yes. From the 14th of August, we sincerely hope we get out of jail.
Dave, final words.
Well, I mean, first of all, I do think there's something really important happening here. I'm very excited about what's going to be the other side of this. You said right at the beginning, well, it's a bit like the Wild West, which is sort of true. And there's a reason why we don't live like that anymore. Like, it sounds good, or people are going to be responsible and we'll all get together, but that's a world of lynch mobs and warlords, and we don't want to live like that. We want to live in a regulated and accountable set of institutions. So that can't happen soon enough, as far as I'm concerned, because there is a fantastic new economy sitting the other side of that crash.
And is there going to be is the bubble going to burst, or is it going to be a kind of slow deflation?
Of course it's going to burst. They always do.
Yeah. Are we in a bubble?
Well, I mean, everybody who does the chart stuff says, it's a colossal bubble, and I've got no reason to disagree with them.
Thank you.
The technology is beautiful. So I don't know whether bubbles. I don't do charts, but the technology will lead to new use cases that is not even imagined now. Traditional companies are seeing, what am I doing now? How can I sell it to my investors that I've put on blockchains to make it sexified? But there are new use cases coming out, and these are by individuals, by small groups. You don't want the regulators to be so hard that it will squash this initiative, but you do need some people to learn how to assess these things. There are some groups that are forming, they're doing ICOs, to try to provide more detailed analysis on the backgrounds and business of what these crowd sales are trying to do. So it is changing every day. Let's hope it just gets better.
Thank you. And JD, you get the final word, which on my team is usually the case.
Yeah. Just something I just mentioned that hasn't really come up is most of the ICOs we're talking about, right, are other companies in the crypto space, and partly because of my former business and contacts that I've got, probably because of some of the stuff we do at PwC, it's become increasingly evident that there's an awful lot of interest in this space outside of our own field of view. By that I mean technology companies that are not traditionally crypto, and I don't mean like your IBMs and your Intels. I mean your early stage companies that are trying to think about non-traditional ways of raising capital or integrating new technologies into the stuff they do, but also asset management firms that are just interested in finding other ways of capitalizing on the space. They want to throw money in, they want to pad the revenues and other things like that. A lot of them don't know what the hell they're looking at, but they understand that they're incredibly smart individuals, they can find a way to get something out of it. So I guess I would just suggest that, I think this stuff is fantastic, but we would probably do well to recognize that there's an awful lot more attention being paid to us than we really realize, and there's an awful lot of opportunity with things like coming out of the SEC for us to really mature it and make it more valuable than even we really think that it is. So.
Sorry, one more thing. Sorry, had to. The SEC has been striking the fear in all these crowd sale projects, and so much so that people are going and they've got a security that they're trying to sell, but they are now squashing it into something else so it doesn't look like a security. They're warping their business model to fit into the non-security area. So it's a bit distorting.
Yeah, but I would beg to say that a lot of the people doing that aren't paying much attention to the SEC and probably aren't talking to their lawyers. I mean, honestly, right? Like, the SEC, they're open to conversation. They're pretty engaging. They're not quick to give you a ruling. The same thing with Ask It Here. Doesn't matter. They want to encourage innovation. They just want to protect investors and protect the economy, right? So they're not people to be feared. And my feeling is that my sense is that people piss and moan about regulators never actually having. They're like the specter that's around the space, and nobody's ever actually seen one.
So,
right?
I've got to shut down my decentralized exchange now with the SEC ruling today.
Depends on what you're selling it.
Sorry?
Depends
So
on what you're selling.
I'm selling tokens. Any tokens.
It doesn't matter.
It could be securities, could be non-securities, but it will have to shut
Well,
down.
if it's
we have we're building a encryption platform to encrypt messaging for IoT and payments, legitimate business, and we're thinking about it's a Singapore-based corporation. We're thinking of doing a token sale in Singapore, not inviting US citizens or American residents. Do we have to even worry about the SEC?
Yes.
Yes. Does your token look and smell like a security?
I'm wondering how far we can go with that. That's what I want to understand about the SEC. We have to worry about MAS.
Look, I'm not a lawyer. I'm barely a consultant.
Are there any lawyers in the room?
And this is, I would on real quick.
Managed investment scheme.
Sorry?
It's a managed investment scheme, is my view of what the DAO was. I don't know what your security is.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
Set up a sandbox in Singapore.
I think you're fine. Like, you're not selling a security, you're selling a product. I mean, like,
that's not PwC.
Yeah,
Bob, if you domicile in Singapore, you may have to pay GST on whatever you do.
That's much better than GST here.
Look, and bear in mind, there have been plenty of crowd sales outside, within the states that don't do any KYC at all. And the SEC is whatever, it's not a security, we're not going to pay attention to this. CFTC is not paying any attention, neither is FinCEN. So honestly, they're not going to go after you. I mean, realistically, you're fine. But if you were extra worried, I would just say do KYC.
Yeah. So we've run out of time. Thank you very much for everyone. My beautiful panel.